for an answer and the ingenuity in them takes over. So the moment that happens and they are taking up positions of responsible business persons within the organization, and because you cannot detach the engineer in them, they are going to come up with very, very innovative models. And you will always find that an innovative model is very much ahead in time in terms of the legal framework. It is generally followed by a change in policy, and then over a period of time when the government accepts that it's a reality or maybe it's too big to be wound down, then they will pass a law which tries to regulate the whole sector. So a small payment bank with these kind of nuances, frankly, I think it is very much welcome. It could be, yes, it is a disruptive move, but then I guess that's what the sector is all about.
Thank you very much. Sorry, go ahead, please.
I'm not sure if I'm audible, but
can we have this during networking during lunchtime, please? Because we're really short of time.
Sure.
Because we'll not do credit to the next panel discussion. Thank you so much.
On that note, can I just thank my panelists for participating today, and if you please give them a warm round of applause, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, audience, for those questions. As ma'am said, you can shoot your questions to our speakers during the networking break. And yes, a big thank you to all the panelists for their insights, which help our audience, in fact, understand the sector better. Time to felicitate our speakers for this session. May I request Ms. Anand to please do the honors and present a memento to Mr. Ran Chakrabarti, the moderator of this session. Please put your hands together. I request her to present a memento next to Mr. Rachit Bail. And your applauses. Mr. Anubhav Mehta, please. The next panel member. I request Ms. Anand to hand over the memento to Ms. Shwetambari Rao, please. Please put your hands together for her contribution. And last but not the least, I request her to present a memento to Mr. Tushar Jarwal. Can we quickly have a photograph of this panel, please? Very quickly. I request all of you to please rise up for the photograph. So Ms. Anand, felicitating all the panel members every time. Of course, we are grateful. We're full of gratitude for your active participation and for gracing this conference with your press of the conference as well. So with more than 20 years of experience in the corporate M&A, Mr. Sachdeva advises across several sectors, including e-commerce, education, technology, hospitality, to name a few. He has been consistently ranked as a leading corporate lawyer in India by some of the most credible publications, including the Legal 500, Asia Pacific, the Expert Guide, and the Who's Who Legal, and others. We welcome you, sir. Once again, please help me welcome our next panelist, who is Mr. Ashish Chandra, General Counsel, Snapdeal. Please put your hands together for him. Mr. Chandra is a seasoned lawyer and a qualified company secretary with 15 years of experience across media, internet, telecom, and technology industry. Under his leadership, Snapdeal has been successful in various cases before the CCI and Compact. These cases have been instrumental in shaping up the competition law jurisprudence in India for e-commerce. Welcome you, sir. Joining them on the panel next is Mr. Ashneer Grover, Head of Legal and Finance Operations at Grofers. Please put your hands together for Mr. Grover. Well, founded in 2014, Grofers, as you all know, is now a 5,000 people strong organization with operations in 10 cities. Mr. Grover has passionately been a part of the organization's accomplishments to connect consumers with their local neighborhood merchants, such as grocery shops, fruit and vegetable vendors, bakeries, pharmacies, baby product shops and electronics, you name it and you have it, getting a wide range of products delivered to their doorstep within 90 minutes. Hello, sir. Welcome. Our next panelist is Mr. Rajesh Begur, Managing Partner of ARA Law. Please put your hands together for him. So, Mr. Begur, one of India's leading lawyers with a diverse corporate practice with a career that spans over 25 years of practical experience, has been recommended by Legal 500, ILFR 1000, Chambers and Partners as one of the prominent lawyers. He has been also recognized as leading individual in the legal arena for his TMT, private equity, corporate mergers and acquisitions, capital market practices, to name a few. Welcome, sir. I would now request the fifth member to please join in the discussion, Mr. Suhan Mukherjee, founder of PLR Chambers. Join me in welcoming him. PLR Chambers, a niche public policy and regulatory advisory law firm. Prior to founding the PLR Chambers, Mr. Mukherjee led the Policy and Regulatory Affairs Practice Group at Amarchand Mangaldas with an overall experience of 11 plus years. He has assisted clients in developing engagement strategy and interfacing with the federal and state regulators and law enforcement agencies. He has extensive legislative drafting experience and has been advising several global e-commerce players as well as PE firms invested in e-commerce in India. Now, before I hand over the charge to Mr. Sachdeva for the discussions, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that we have truncated the session to 45 minutes strictly. So over to you, sir, for further proceedings of the discussion. Please put your hands together once again.
It's there. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. We have a lot of limitations today. I've been told not to move from a chair, first of all. So we have to just sit here and then talk. And secondly, usually lawyers talk when they are paid to. So there are a few exceptions that we have here, and thanks to Bitika, who's making lots of lawyers talk without even getting paid for it. So I think we really have to be, short and sweet here, and crisp to the topic that we have right now on the panel. We in the morning heard illuminaries of this industry speaking their views on almost all areas, and including we heard Ashish as well as part of that illuminary speaking there. I think I'll therefore stick very crisp to what the discussion topic we have in hand, as we call the brief that we have right now, which is FDI, or the challenges that we have for FDI into e-commerce sector here. FDI or capital to e-commerce is like oxygen to a human. Without this capital here, obviously you need ideas and innovation, but without capital here, you cannot have an e-commerce company, operating or running or even seeing a success to itself. That source of capital in India is very limited for an e-commerce company. It is limited because the conventional loans are not easily available to e-commerce sector because of lack of the underlying security that can be offered to the conventional institutional lenders like banks. After the conventional lending, the other sources of, or other so-called institutional sources of capital or funding for any company in India are, your non-institutional finances, which again are not available for our sector here. There may be few exceptions, which we can say where the funding may be made available or have been made available for e-commerce, which is HNIs or family offices, or small funds which have been giving some breathing or some oxygen to this sector here. but the large magnitude or the most significant part of the fund for e-commerce sector in India is coming from the foreign direct investment here. And when we speak about FDI, I think we all know that we are not just talking about Walmart or Tesco's or Alibaba or Amazon of the world. We speak about the funds, the funds which are the private equity funds or the angel funds or funds under any nomenclature or a shape or size, which are giving the most important ingredient for success of an e-commerce company. There have been, we've seen earlier today as to how we can categorize these e-commerce companies into 2 or 3 different baskets. But if we speak about the companies which are in action these days, the likes of if we can call them retail e-commerce companies, there have been challenges in following the most optimal model of operation, if I can say that. And obviously, these companies are in operation. We heard Ashish speaking earlier today that the government is not interfering in the marketplace model at all. But then, is that the best model for operation? Is that the most optimal model for operation of these companies? I mean, that's something that we will touch upon in this debate today. And what else can we expect from the government? Obviously, we heard that we're expecting laissez-faire and or some proactive sort of reforms on this sector to make sure that this oxygen supply to this life is not affected at all in time to come. So a second thought process would be what else government should do to reform the existing policy that the government has in place for FDI in e-commerce sector. But before I start, I think, I don't want to call it an ad break, but we'll have a quick session from Rajesh because he wants to give us a quick overview of what those FDI norms are as of now in this sector here. Rajesh? You want to play this? Yeah. Yeah, just start the presentation. And Rajesh, the same rule will apply to you as well. It has to be just short and sweet. Right?
I've got too many warnings as a lawyer, and too much of intimidation.
I'm only passing.
So I'm accepting that, and I'll stick to the rules. Yeah. So
we need to make it automatic route. That's what we are saying.
So basically, I'll be flipping channels as we do when we watch TV. So I think a lot of people out here are lawyers. So anybody wants a presentation at the end of the day, I think Bitika legally can assist that. But please excuse my speed today. There are different models of e-commerce that are available in this country and all around the globe. And I won't bore you all with the details. But as in any other jurisdiction, we've also evolved from a front-end, back-end structure, which most companies, including Flipkart, started off with. And thereafter, we have moved to the marketplace. Now, in marketplace, this is the front-end, back-end structure that we had. In the marketplace model, again, there are some large players who work on the inventory-based model and some others who work on the direct pure marketplace model. Pure marketplace model. So basically, I think that the question today is whether this model is the right model and is there a better model, and how do we deal with FDI in e-commerce, especially keeping in mind that FDI in multi-brand retail is still a taboo. So for lawyers, I don't need to get, I think for most of us, I think we know that FDI in most of the sectors around the e-commerce model, I think whether it be logistic player, be it the warehouse, be it the B2B sector, we are under the 100% automatic route. The only question and the big question today is primarily the B2C model. And that is where the debate on FDI is. So just focusing our entire discussion on how do we achieve FDI in B2C model. Clearly, there are various pros and cons. And I think there is enough of debate, and I think we've heard this morning on the recent Delhi High Court litigation also. I think the last date was 14th October. I'm not sure what was the outcome of that litigation. But there is enough of benefits and disadvantages. And as a lawyer who has worked in different sectors, I can only say, for example, in the telecom sector, when we started advising clients like Hutchison Whampoa way back about 1996, the regulatory framework was pretty fluid. There was hardly any regulatory framework there in the telecom sector. FDI was restricted. And likewise, I think I compare that with the telecom sector or any such sector, because India being an evolving market, it has to evolve. And the question is, do we wait for the government to frame the laws and then we start business? Answer is no. We heard Mr. Bakshi say that we have to start somewhere and then let the marketplace, let the business evolve over time. Hopefully the government will catch up. The only thing we don't want the government doing is creating any roadblocks. And I think I just want to sum up by saying something like, I took a Uber day before yesterday when my driver gave me away in terms of not being there on time when I was attending a meeting with Zia. And I was surprised that driver was a truck driver and he was driving a car, sedan. So he said, sir, that I was drawing 6,000 rupees salary, and today I'm getting 10,000 rupees salary, and I make 50 rupees per trip. And I did a quick maths that he was making at least 3 times more money than what he was yesterday, thanks to e-commerce. When we did the first transaction with Flipkart, way back about 8-10 years back, and I was sitting with Sachin trying to negotiate the investment document, we did not have space to keep my laptop, his laptop, and my colleague's laptop on the same table. Okay, the room was so small, and his packing was happening next door. So, looking back today, where he was then, and in the last couple of years, the way they have grown the Flipkart model, it has been a tremendous improvement. And I think the government hopefully will catch up. I think I think sum up to just say that there is enough and more to be done. We cannot let industry wait for rules and regulations to be framed. There are ifs and buts, but clearly there is a definite overedge of the benefits over disadvantages, and that would be my only submission to the government if at all they hear this story. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. So, Ashish, I think I'll start with you. We obviously seen Rajesh's presentation where he, culled out nicely what those different structures or different business models which are in operation in India in the retail e-commerce sector here. Retail means the kind of company that you are in. And we would like to take your expert views as to what do you think about different structures, or do you think that one is better than other, or the other is better than the third one? And what do you think the government, or what do you think how far we are, first of all, from the most optimal business model in e-commerce?
Thanks, Pradeep. So, to your first question, I would say that, as they say, that let's not put the cart before the horse, right? So, when anybody has to do, so-called e-commerce business in India, it's not that he would first want to create the structure and then he will decide his own business model. Because every entrepreneur has his or her own DNA that I want to do this business in a particular fashion. If someone has to do an inventory-led business, then yes, it's a gray area that how should you structure this particular business so that you're not falling foul of the FDI restrictions. But those who believe that yes, I don't want to do an inventory-led business, but I want to do an inventory-managed business, or I want to just play a pure technology to build some technology so that buyer and seller can interact. I think they are very clear-headed because they know that I don't need to create any structure first and then decide my business model. I know that's my business model and I want to do this way. So I don't think if you are playing, if your business model is pure marketplace and inventory managed, not inventory owned, I believe the law is quite straightforward and people don't really first create structure. But if I can space in my car, my cost comes down to 200 and 600 rupees, right? So we are moving on the shared economy. Let's say, I have a bike at my home, which I don't drive over the weekdays because I have to go to the office. Someone need the bike to drive to his office on a weekday. My bike is lying idle. He can pay me, let's say, maybe 100 rupees per day and can take my bike. Now, what kind of a category it is, right? So let's think on that, because e-commerce, I think the debate, to my mind personally, and basis my interaction with the various people, in the government, is more or less settled. They are just sitting on something which they will come out with some good law. But I think let's move beyond and see that how we structure on the shared economy issues. So that's more in terms of the business model. Now coming to what government is thinking about FDI and all. So if you see FDI policy, if you just slice and dice and try to read between the lines, you have a para which talks about e-commerce. You have a second para which talks about cash and carry wholesale trading. You have a third para which talks about multi-brand retail trading. You have a fourth para which talks about single brand retail trading. These are the four broad, right? Cash and carry, because it's a B2B, no issues. You can do e-commerce also B2B. When it comes to e-commerce definition per se, if you see that definition in a very interesting way, it says that the retail trading, which is B2C, on an e-commerce platform is not allowed. So in that definition, they have clearly distinguished between the trading as an activity and the means on which that trading has to happen, because they have specifically used the word e-commerce platform. My interpretation is that the e-commerce platform is not restricted, in the definition. The way you do the trading on e-commerce platform is restricted. Now, if you come down to multi-brand retail and your single brand retail, they have a clause in that. The damaging part of the clause is that it says that either a multi-brand or a single brand e-commerce retail in any form. The word is in any form leads into some kind of open-ended interpretation that even a marketplaces who are not inventory-led but inventory-managed can also fall in that definition. So that gives some kind of a scary thought in the mind of regulators. So my suggestion is that, if those things can be watered down a bit, right? Maybe some explanation can be added through some press notes that, we have consulted your government and your stakeholder through that DIPP consultation paper. And we believe that these are the two marketplace model, we believe that it's a pure play technology and it should not have it. So that all this kind of, fog in the air gets settled. The third important point which, government can do, in fact, everybody, in the country can do, especially HNIs, big industrial houses, is that why don't they start investing multi-million dollars? They do angel investing of few $100,000 to few $1 million. Why can't they write a check of $100 million plus? I haven't seen any big Indian industrial house or any big Indian HNI writing a check of $100 million to, your Oyo rooms or Ola or Snapdeal or my Flipkart. Why? Let's change the mindset, because if you go and talk to these HNIs, industrial houses, first thing is that, when are you going to get into break-even? That's the first question. This industry, we know Amazon took a lot of time to come to break-even, but they are one of the fantastic company internationally as far as the e-commerce go. So it's a time for them to invest so that they can reap the benefit after 5-10 years. And the other way to look at this your investment, if you get a liquidity or exit after 3-4 years, you make 10x, 15x of that. So I think the government, along with the people, including lawyers, because you advise so many HNI clients, industrial houses, help your clients to open up their mind, and why can't they trust this industry in India as it has been trusted by your foreigners who are writing billion-dollar check? I would love to see Indian industrial houses and HNIs writing $100 million checks, and then why should I go outside India to get the money and face the regulatory issues?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Ashish. I think very rightly said that we need not to put the cart before the horse, and obviously we fully understand the views of the government as of now on the FDI in the marketplace. And now my next question is to Ashneer, who represents a more niche sector within what we have been seeing as a retail e-commerce companies, which is, again, going back to Ashish as what you were saying, which is fulfilling the needs of people here. Obviously, maybe, let's say Snapdeal and, big boys are fulfilling at a different level. Then we have Grofers or Peppertap, where they are actually fulfilling a grocery need of, of people here. And, I was surprised to see my own mom using Peppertap and Grofers as app to even order some grocery here. So, Ashneer, what are your views? You heard Ashish, you heard, plenty of luminaries early in the morning as well. What are your views on this aspect?
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, I'll speak in Hindi. It's not that I can't speak in English. I think it's a veil we put to say fancy things. And yeah. So, see, if मैं FDI policy let's just look at the FDI policy, right? It doesn't even define marketplace, right? It's a definition we have taken on us, saying कि हम तो धंधा कर रहे हैं और आपने ये buckets बना दिए कि हम तो किसी bucket में नहीं बैठ रहे, and that is the core of the problem. कि गवर्नमेंट ने बोला कि आप या तो इस bucket में हो, इस bucket में हो, इस bucket में हो. हमने बोला आपने ये define ही नहीं करी bucket, हम तो है ही नहीं उसमें. That's where all the ambiguity is coming in. Now, every structure, every regulation is driven by business. End of the day, अगर किसी चीज़ की कोई अहमियत ही नहीं है, कोई उसके पीछे नहीं पड़ने वाला. हुआ ये है कि 6 साल पहले भी लोग बोलते थे कि ये तो बच्चे हैं, ठीक है, 28 से 30 साल का फाउंडर होता है, ये बच्चे हैं, इनको बाहर से पैसा मिल रहा है, इनको लग रहा है कि यूएस का एक मॉडल है, चलता है यूएस में, सैन फ्रांसिस्को में चला, न्यूयॉर्क में चला, चाइना में चल गया, इंडिया में लाके ये चला लेंगे, ये तो ख़त्म होएंगे. दैट इज़ दी माइंडसेट. आप चाहे हम माने या ना माने, चाहे वो ट्रेडिशनल बिजनेस है, चाहे गवर्नमेंट हो गई या ब्यूरोक्रेसी हो गई, सबका माइंडसेट ये है कि ये तो फ़ौरन पैसे पे चल रहे हैं, एक वहाँ से कॉपी पेस्ट करके लाए हैं यहाँ पे, पैसा ख़त्म हो जाएगा, दुकान बंद हो जाएगी, क्यों करना है कुछ. इस माइंडसेट से करते करते आपको 6 साल हो गए, ठीक है. जो आप एक ट्रेडिशनल रिटेल का बिजनेस चला रहे थे, जो 10 साल में आप नहीं खड़ा कर पाए, उससे 3, पूरा इंडस्ट्री की बात कर रहा हूँ मैं, जो आप बोलो कि एक ऑर्गेनाइज्ड रिटेल इंडस्ट्री, उससे 3 गुना ई कॉमर्स का सबसे ज़्यादा प्लेयर आज की डेट में ट्रेड करता है. दैट इज़ द फैक्ट. एंड नाउ दैट वो जो डिनायल है, अब आप उसमें कितनी देर रहोगे. सो जो इंडस्ट्री जो पहले बोलती थी कि ये तो मर जाएंगे मर जाएंगे मर जाएंगे, नाउ दे रियलाइज यार 6 साल होगा अभी तक तो नहीं मरे, अब क्या यार उठ के देख लेते हैं कि हो क्या रहा है यहाँ पे. एंड दैट इज़ वाई वी आर हैविंग ऑल दिस डिबेट एंड ऑल दिस टॉक अबाउट FDI है नहीं. सो एवरी अदर डे समवन टेल्स मी कि हाई कोर्ट में RI ने केस डाल दिया, हाई कोर्ट में किसी जूते वाले ने केस डाल दिया. आई सेड कि ठीक है यार, वो तो चलना ही है. मतलब अब इफ़ इट इज़ ओनली गिविंग क्रेडेंस टू द बिजनेस is the way I look at it. Now we can always keep slicing and dicing and have a more technical debate कि ये inventory led है या अब B2B entity पीछे बना सकते हो, बीच में एक B2C entity आ गई तो सब कुछ कोशर हो गया. वो सब those are sort of the headroom given to the lawyers by the government saying कि देखो कहीं डिफाइन तो है नहीं, अब आपको करना है तो आप कर रहे हो, तो how do you make it more legal for yourself? That's how we are doing it. But from as a businessman, मेरे को जो समझ आता है, and which is where we derive our fundamental comfort, and we don't go to at night sleepless saying कि यार कल को FDI बंद तो नहीं हो जाएगा, और बंद हो गया तो क्या होगा, कि कस्टमर की तरफ से डिमांड है, सब कुछ भूल जाइए. पीछे सप्लाई कैसे हो रहा है, एक इन्वेंट्री से हो रहा है, एक वेयर हाउस से हो रहा है, एक दुकान से हो रहा है, या सीधा फैक्ट्री से हो रहा है, उस कुछ फ़र्क नहीं पड़ता. कस्टमर की तरफ से मार्केट में डिमांड है जो इस्टेब्लिश हो चुका है ईयर ऑन ईयर. अगर गवर्नमेंट कुछ भी ऐसा करती है जहाँ पे वो कस्टमर की इस डिमांड को मतलब बिल्कुल ही साइड पे रख दे और बोले कि नहीं ये तो सब कुछ ही इलीगल है, बिलियंस ऑफ डॉलर्स आ गए, वो तो ठीक है, किसी का it's not someone's personal money, someone institutional money, it can also go down the drain. But the government cannot ignore the demand एंड दे कैन नॉट ऑल्सो इग्नोर द इकोसिस्टम. एक बात तो ये हो गई कि आपने बोल दिया कि SUV पे मैं टैक्स लगाऊंगा क्योंकि तो रईसों का गेम है, लेट देम पे द टैक्स, पोल्यूशन भी बहुत करते हैं. ई-कॉमर्स वहाँ पे नहीं रह गया. आप हमको 6 महीने हुए हैं बिजनेस में, हम 3000 डिलीवरी एम्प्लॉय करते हैं, 1500 से ज़्यादा हमारा फुल टाइम एम्प्लॉयज़ हैं, राइट. एंड मैं तो 6 महीने पुरानी कंपनी हूँ. स्नैपडील और भी पुरानी कंपनी है, फ्लिपकार्ट और भी पुरानी कंपनी है, अमेजोन और भी पुरानी कंपनी है. जिस लेवल पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट जनरेट हो रहा है आज की डेट में कंट्री पे, एंड इट इज़ नॉट, ये भी नहीं है कि सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास की गेम है, क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट को लगता है कस्टमर तो मिडिल क्लास है जो थोड़ा टेक सेवी है. आपके सेलर देखेंगे, आप मानेंगे नहीं कहाँ लेवल के सेलर हैं, किस किस लेवल पे उनको हम मेन स्ट्रीम में लाए हैं, जहाँ पे वो सब कैश का धंधा करते थे, एंड नाउ दे आर गेटिंग proper finance from the banks on the back of them being sellers on us or being in business with us. And how many people we are employing in urban area, which are called the lower middle class or lower class people in urban area. It is not a number which any government can just say कि it's a niche industry, इसको बंद कर दो या इसमें हम ये कर देंगे और कुछ नहीं होगा. Government has to take a very very cognizant view कि पूरा ecosystem क्या खड़ा हुआ है. And we only derive our comfort from there. You people are more learned. I'm not a lawyer, but मेरे को तो इसी बात से comfort मिलता है कि यार सुबह से लेकर शाम तक मेरे को कोई ना कोई तो मिल जाता है जो ई-कॉमर्स में कुछ खरीद रहा होता है.
Thank you, Sneed. Very good to hear your views. I was just trying to see if you can speak FDI in Hindi also, Videshi Seedhi investment, one of those, but it's all right. Obviously, good to hear that, that this is something that needs to be. But one thing I can tell you why we are debating this subject today or the topic today is that I think we heard earlier also today in the morning is that there is not enough done by the government to promote this sector here, the sector which is contributing to the economy in various ways by generating employment, by eliminating up to a large extent the cash economy in the country, by generating business, by generating startups, by generating ideas, convenience to the to the public at large. Despite of all that, what do we have on a platter is set of, if I can say, ambiguous provisions, where you have been let to be decided by your lawyer as to which way you should be following as opposed to which way you should be following yourself for the business need here, not a legal need here. So, that's why we need to just still find out as to what that optimal model could be and what the government should do as to make sure that there are no ambiguities, from day till the evening as to whether there'll be, whether we need to hire a few more lawyers to represent ourselves in a court or a few more lawyers to go to FIPB and represent ourselves to find out what we are doing is correct or not, because we all believe that what we are doing is absolutely within the four corners here. Now from here I'll go to Suhan to give his insight now from the legal perspective as a lawyer. And also Suhan, can you please speak about some of the ecosystem of this e-commerce, primarily this payment gateway companies. Why would there be any embargo to get any FDI into a payment gateway, sort of a company here?
Thank you. I think I'd like to put some context to what I'm going to say, and I think we need to look at the FDI policy as a political document, actually. Most of us sit here as lawyers and we look at it as a legal document, but it's actually a political document. And we need to be able to, and I think it's a clash between the new economy and the old economy. I think it's also about the intermediation of technology. The intermediation of technology actually disrupts existing power structures. And it is the political forces behind this disruptive the old economy that actually influences governments both at the federal level and at the state level to be able to influence and create gatekeepers or barriers to trade. And I think the e-commerce industry, and I'll actually call it the digital industry, not just e-commerce, I think the digital industry needs to get more aggressive. And I think and because it's now a matter of public record, I'm speaking about it, is that the aggression that has been shown by the taxi aggregators is the aggression that I believe that other areas of the sector need to show. Because the fact is that the taxi aggregator industry was not an illegal industry. But everyone fell into believing that it is. There is enough existing law on record that legitimizes the e-commerce industry. I think I fault ourselves as the legal community to a great extent in not taking this argument to government, is the fact that we've got lost in the weeds of trying to define models that will work. The fact is the sustainability of the e-commerce industry cannot work if we are going to be creating models, because what it does is it binds in the entrepreneur. For us, it's to be able to create an enabling platform that allows the entrepreneur to take technology tools to deliver a service or sell products, etc., etc. And I think if you look at the way Ola and Uber and others have not felt scared about going to court or be taken to court. I've been at the forefront of that intermediation, and if you see, last week we got regulations out from the central government. The fact is that in spite of that, they were never able to shut down the taxi aggregators because the government was also aware that this business is legal. The Information Technology Act very clearly makes all of this legal. The political argument that was there is the fact that historically transportation has been a subject matter of the states. And the states, and this is to do with the pre-colonial structure of our legislation in the transportation sector, where only the Indian Railways is what mattered. And the reason I'm going into this example is because it will give you a context of, the clash of how technology and the way in society and what we're doing in the country and how our legal systems sometimes hold us back, and where the fight is actually political and not legal, is the fact that the government of India at a point in time was only interested in the Indian Railways. It's the reason why the railway budget was also presented before the general budget, because the budget of the Indian Railways was larger than the budget of the government of India. And they left the regulation of transport to the princely states. Now that's the historical context of our transportation law. Because of that, the political intermediation said that even though information technology is a union subject, the government of India was kind of hands-off in saying that I really don't want to make legislation under section 79(2)(b), which is actually empowers the central government to issue regulations, and that would have solved the problem right at the beginning. We said we need to find a political solution and the states need to be taken on board. Now what do you find in the states? The Motor Vehicles Act only regulated guys who owned vehicles or employed drivers. Technology as an intermediary or as an intermediation generally doesn't get into owning any